Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of Automation Hour. As usual, we'll start with a few housekeeping items. And so, Stu, if you would so kindly advance our slides, please. We've got everybody on mute. However, we love your interaction in these sessions, so please go ahead and either post your questions in the question widget here in GoToWebinar or into the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community. We'll monitor both places. We are recording this, so anything stupid I say will be recorded for posterity, and we will post that to our YouTube channel after the session is over. Again, we always invite you to connect with us on social, so you can find us on the Trailblazer community, as well as Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where all of our session recordings will be posted later. All right, next up, we've got a great set of topics for the rest of the year. We've gone boot camp. So today we're going to talk about logic building and process mapping, kind of the before you start to build piece. But we've got the rest of the year built out, teaching you all about different flows. So we've got the first half of the year schedule here. Next slide will give you everything for the second half of the year.
Yes.
Stu, if you want to jump to that. And then, of course, the link on there for the upcoming webinars is how you can register for any of the sessions that you'd like to attend. You certainly don't have to attend all of them, but we welcome you anytime you want to join us. All right, so next slide. We got to say thank you to our sponsors. Without them, we would not be able to provide you this content every other week. So to Concrete.io, who's been with us since the beginning, we want to say thank you. Our next sponsor is a little bit more recent, but just as valued. So Sumo Scheduler, also appreciate their involvement with us. And last but not least by any stretch of the imagination, ActiveCampaign helps us send out the reminder emails so you all come and join our webinars. And so again, we want to say thank you to them. So in case you're wondering who I am, I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Hansen, and of course I'm joined today by Rakesh Gupta, our other co-host. But let's face it, you're really not here to see us. You are here to see our amazing guest presenter and MVP, Stu Adil. So Stu, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right, and I'm not going to leave this slide here very long, but I just wanted to say I did find my first dev org was in July, summer 2008, sorry. And I did find the motto or the logo for that summer was the ice cream bar. And I'm really excited about that. Otherwise, let's see, to introduce myself, I am an architect at Thrivent Financial, and one of the other things I'm proud of is I'm still working at the St. Paul Public Schools as a volunteer and coordinate the CTE board. That is the Continuing Technical Education Board for the St. Paul Public Schools. That's all you really need to know about me right now. And also, I am a lover of Automation Hour. One of the things that we didn't show you on those first slides was before this episode, where we're going to talk about process mapping and logic and pseudocode, we talked about strategy. We talked about why are you building automation? What's the strategy around automation? Those were really great episodes. And so if you want to learn more about the why and the what are we doing here, go back and watch those. A lot of that stuff is things that I'm going to be leaning on. And you're not going to see any real code here today. But what we're going to talk about is, again, preparing yourself for when you start to build your flows. What are you building? Why are you building it? And when I was preparing this set of slides, in January, I was looking at LinkedIn. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I saw this little dialogue here from someone out in the community talking about the best way to build flow and the best way to get better at flow. And this is a way that most people think about how to be better at flow, is just to build flows. And this is true. Yes, one of the comments, so the first comment below was, hey, maybe, perhaps, you should start by actually designing the flow, planning the flow, preparing the flow. And the author said yeah, maybe, but I don't know anything about designing. Ah, that hurts. That hurts my heart. As an architect, as a planner, I wish I could reach out and say, come and learn how to plan and prepare. Uh, so later that day, again on LinkedIn, someone had posted this, and maybe we've all seen this sort of thing. It was a flow, and then a lot of comments. You'll see that there were 75 comments and perhaps even more later that day, comments about this flow. Some were negative comments, some were positive comments. And I'm not going to really talk about the comments or talk about this flow in general. What I want to think about or ask about is things that I've asked about when I come on to Automation Hour as a participant. One of the questions that I ask at the end of every Automation Hour is, what did you do to plan your flow? What tools did you use to prepare building and designing your flow? I like to ask that of every presenter, and not to put them on guard, but just to say, how did you go about understanding what it is that you used to prepare? Another thing that I think about is in some of the meetings with Salesforce, I'll hear people ask for a way to document the flow. Is there a tool that we can use that will have Salesforce just document out the flow and tell me what this flow does? I'm not sure that there ever will be a tool that Salesforce will create that will take this flow and document out what it does, or why it's there, or what the goal or purpose of this flow is. And just to remind you, never read the comments. On LinkedIn, some of those comments really aren't very helpful, and so I just kind of scan through them and I don't really even engage in the comments. But I still think about, how can we make flow better? How can we make automation better? And so I have to go back to the basics here. My basics. We could comment about that if you want to make comments. My first programming adventure, we had a ColecoVision when I was a youth. The ColecoVision had things like Donkey Kong on it, Galaxa, some really simple video games, but also there was a computer that could slide into the front port of the ColecoVision, and I thought it was awesome. You could do advanced things on this Atom computer, and I thought I was a real super nerd by having this thing. But to program it, you could get magazines and books, and then follow the books and the magazines and write your own code, and the code would actually go on cassette tapes, on magnetic cassette tapes. It would take forever to write it, and then you could print it out on this like daisy wheel printer. Uber nerdy, I know, this is awesome. But the code would look something like this. This is almost reminds me of some of these crazy flow readouts. Like, how do you document what this code is doing, what the purpose is, and what the goal is of this code? I don't have a clue. Again, this was like really complicated. And even the lines that were drawn here to say, well, if you follow the lines, it'll tell you what it does. Yeah, it's still not very helpful. This is the stuff that I wrote. I still don't know what it does or why I wrote it. But I mean, that's where I started in my first programming. I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. But I have good memories from that. So let's go back to flow. Let's go back to automation. So I searched, how do I start using flow? If you look at Google search, you can search for it, and Google search will tell you these things. You open Flow Builder and you search for flows, and you'll find it under process automation. And then from setup, you enter flows and you select flows and you click on new flow, and then you select the flow type and you click create. And now you create the flow that will impact your experience. That is how you create a flow. ChatGPT has a more verbose explanation on how to create a flow. But after reading it, I'm still not sure I yet understand how to create a flow. Although at the end it did say, go to Trailhead or find videos to help better understand how to use it. Now that was a little more helpful. How do I start using Flow? Again, goes back to that first slide. How do you learn to use Flow? By using Flow. Maybe we should ask why we should use Flow. Well, why do we use any automation? I think that's a better question. So we use Flow for automation, and automation is to help with business processes. So one of the areas that we use for business processes is something that is a recurring, time-sensitive, involved process that just may need help. It's a manual issue that humans could do, but don't need to do, or it might require some sort of audit that needs that systematic trail in order to follow for compliance reasons or legal reasons. Those would be good candidates to put into automation. The other big one that we've heard over and over again at Dreamforce and other conferences is talking about waste, business process waste. You may have heard this in Lean and other systems. And the different types of waste include things like talent. The people and resources should be doing other things than wasting their time doing repetitive processes. We don't want to waste inventory that might be sitting around, and automation can help in moving inventory to the right place or having the right inventory at the right time. All of these other things, when we talk about waste, are things that we don't want to have waste. We want to have the right transportation at the right time. We don't want to have defects. And if we have automation that's doing the right things, that will reduce the amount of defects, overproduction, overprocessing, and waiting for the right things to happen. All can be reduced with the right kinds of automation. And in previous episodes of Automation Hour, you can go back to the last few weeks. We talk about these kind of things. Other guests have talked about how to choose the different automations, things that are of high value and perhaps low risk, or high value and the business has interest in doing those things. Choose those things to incorporate automation. Why am I here? Well, I'm an architect. And so when I think about automation, I think about good architecture and design. This is something that, a picture that I stole a little bit here from Allison Park, also a great architect at Salesforce. And they talk about poor design in architecture. You can think about poor city design. Poor city design, there's no public transit. Poor city design has no common facilities. Again, poor design in your architecture would have no rules, standards, or policies. It's not scalable. And it would have built-in silos where the winner, the squeaky wheel, always gets the grease. That's not necessarily what we want to have in your architecture of your org. But good design, good architecture is always forward-looking. It's analyzing your org, analyzing what your users needs, what your business needs, and following a certain plan, following certain governance. You create common services that work together. You have streets and utilities and schools that can be open and available to all sorts of people. And these would have standards that would be safe, have high quality, are reliable to a lot of different people, and understandable for anyone that wants to use them. So good architecture, good design, also good automation would follow these same architecture standards. So we just, I guess my advice is here that, yes, when learning how to do flows, you need to learn the flows, and we will. Over the boot camp, over the next several weeks and into months, you're going to learn the components and how to build the flows. But right now, I want to take a moment just to say, as you're doing this, also consider that what you're building has to fall into good architecture and design. You want to build things that are of good common service, that they are things that can last, and you're going to plan them out and think about what you're building as you're building them. And so that's what we're going to do here today. If we don't do that, there is a risk. And we're going to talk about that risk as well and why that's important. This is something from the Department of Computer Science at the University of Calgary. They talked about the fact that 70% of developers don't use diagrams, and if they do, it's only in the beginning. So this is a meme, maybe not real, but some of it actually is things that I've taken from the past. You may have come into a project early and said, can you show me a diagram of what this project does or what this system does? And you see Monday's diagram on it. And then you start to work with it. You start to look at it and you say, well, but I have a question. This thing here didn't really point to that. And I have an input that didn't match up to Monday's diagram. And so this, oh, yes, that's right. Well, let's create a new diagram on Wednesday. And by Friday, the diagram looks completely different. If we don't plan out and really understand what our automation does, we will have patterns like this. We need to have common artifacts that explain our projects, that explain our artifacts, that explain our flows. So here's where we talk about process mapping, visualization, the logic of your automation. Before you even start to open up flows, before you start to open up any sort of a code builder, sit down and talk to your users, talk to your peers, talk to the rest of your admins, and talk about what is the problem. And can we map it out? Can we, on a whiteboard, on a cocktail napkin, anything? Let's write out the simple business process that we're trying to do. This I grabbed from a Salesforce workbook that was at Dreamforce from several years ago. Talked about just simple process mapping. And it doesn't talk about any specific process in general, but anyone can follow it. There's a start to it, and it looks at a file, asks some questions about the file, and moves through a process of processing that data. And if it succeeds, it moves along. If it fails, it goes to a different process. As you're moving through this picture with your peers or your business partners or whoever, you can ask some questions. Does this process involve one person or more people? Are there actions that need to be performed during each one of these responses? And are we collecting data along with this, or are we just spitting out an answer? Make sure that you understand what is happening for the business, for the process, as you're doing your automation. So let's go into pseudocode. What is pseudocode? I didn't actually, I knew about pseudocode. I didn't really understand pseudocode is a real thing. And so this was something else I learned upon this process. Pseudocode is an organized sequence of actions. It can be read and followed by anyone, whether you're a programmer or a BA or a business partner. It doesn't have to be in a specific syntax. It could be just words. But in pseudocode, every action should be in its own line. And then after each line, you should ask yourself, what's next? And then what next could be actually a bunch of different things. What's next could be what's next if it succeeds, what's next if it fails, or what's next if a bunch of different things happen. But in the end, pseudocode really should be a story in a linear fashion of what your automation is going to do. And so I'm going to stop the slides and I'm going to ask if I can get volunteers here, and we're going to create pseudocode together. And I'm going to see if this is going to work. And Michelle, I'm going to ask Michelle to come and help me on this one. Hi.
Hi. I'm so thrilled to be your guinea pig.
Yay, guinea pig. And I'm hoping that this works. So I'm going to bring up a notepad now. I don't know what this is going to look like for our viewers. This will be interesting. Are people able to see my notepad?
Yes.
Okay. And this is just to show that I'm not using anything fancy to do this pseudocode in. It doesn't require a special tool. I'm doing it in just plain old Notepad. But it is just to say, I'm going to line out a business process and explain what is going to happen next. And this will be interesting because we haven't really walked through this business process yet, other than I maybe give you one line to say what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is we are going to create a peanut butter sandwich. And
Ooh, just a peanut butter sandwich. Okay.
And the pseudocode is going to explain to us what we need to do in order to build a peanut butter sandwich. And I will start us out with one just general statement that says we are going to obtain the ingredients. So we have all the resources available to make peanut butter sandwiches. We don't have to go out and shop and buy for them. But that is a very general statement. And then I'm going to ask you as the business stakeholder to please help me walk through the next pieces of the process. What do we need to do in order to put this peanut butter sandwich together?
All right. So obtain ingredients means we've shopped for them, right? So they're at least
Yes.
at the same spot that I am. All right. Well, we're going to start with the key one, in my opinion, which is wash your hands.
All right.
Then after I'm done washing, and I suppose wash and dry your hands, if we want to get specific about this,
Okay.
then I would want to assemble my ingredients on the counter. So if you're in one of those cooking show people like I am, get your mise en place ready. So
What?
pull everything out that you need on the counter. So your peanut butter and your knife and your bread and your plate.
Hmm. Okay.
Uh-oh. Stu, you there?
Oh, I am. Tell me more.
Okay. Tell you more about assembling ingredients. Well, I'd have to locate the cabinet that the peanut butter's in. Probably also have to locate the shelf that the peanut butter's on. And I'd also have to be able to identify the peanut butter. Because if I did not do the shopping, am I looking for a Jeff jar that somebody else decided that they wanted to buy Skippy? Um, so kind of do I know what I'm looking for? Also,
Okay.
I'd have to locate where the bread's located. So, is it stored in a freezer? Is it in a bread box? Is it in the pantry? Does it hang out on the counter?
Okay.
I'd have to locate the knife drawer, the silverware drawer, so I can get out a butter knife specifically. Because if we're talking about knives, I suppose I could grab the cleaver and try that, but I'm guessing I'm going to have some problems with the peanut butter in a cleaver. I'd also want to pull out a plate. So I'd probably want to locate the cabinet that the plates are in, as well as the shelf the plates are on. And I have to decide what size plate do I want or need, or do I want a paper plate versus, a ceramic or a real plate.
Okay.
And then probably anything else that you would want, but a peanut butter sandwich should just be bread and peanut butter, I think. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
all right. So I think next steps would be open the bread bag, pull out the bread, 2 pieces, assuming we're making a single sandwich.
Uh,
And then I don't know if this is how it is in your house, but the next step is going to be close the bread bag.
Thank you.
Don't don't leave that out to air dry. Oh my gosh, I haven't been paying attention to the comments and they are hysterical, y'all. Apparently Carol has kids who put the peanut butter in their room. This is fantastic.
Oh,
Love it. All right, so after I've pulled out the 2 pieces of bread, I would put them on the plate, one piece next to the other piece. Then next I'd open the peanut butter jar. So, and then I would have to take that knife and I'd have to scoop out a big old hunk of peanut butter, um, which as a younger child, apparently at my house, we just scraped off the top. So the first time my best friend came over, opened a new jar of peanut butter and shoved that knife down there and scooped, I was horrified. I had no idea what she was doing to my peanut butter. And then she's like, doesn't everybody do that? And I'm like, apparently not. So once you've used the knife to scoop that peanut butter from the jar, you should also slather that all over one piece of bread or possibly both pieces if we wanted extra peanut buttery. So after that, I mean, it's a butter knife, so I'm going to tell on myself here, lick the knife, man. Get the rest of the peanut butter off of it. Um, and then that knife should go into the sink or dishwasher, depending on what you got going on. Oh yes, Carol, I've made some assumptions that this is not natural peanut butter that has started to separate and needs to be stirred to get it back into. into whatever format it's supposed to be as peanut butter, and Dylan, no, you cannot get a demo and follow the directions. I
Oh,
refuse to have that on recording. That's for sure.
oh, I like
But
that.
Chad, yes, honestly, I have actually just eaten a peanut butter sandwich before. I ran out of jelly, and so there we go. Sometimes you got to do what you got in the house, right? That's called bad shopping list planning. So, all right, now it's time to slap both pieces of bread together, peanut butter sides in, because I can absolutely imagine someone trying to follow these directions and playing dumb and putting the peanut butter on the outside, which would just be so messy. All right. Um, and this for me is because I don't mind crusts and I also don't mind a whole sandwich, but if for someone wanted the crust cut off, that could be next as long as, you get a different knife or don't actually lick it several steps ahead of time, or also cut it into fun shapes. And then at that point, I think we're ready to have lunch.
Okay. All right. This is great. Thank you. Pseudocode. So we have a list of what this will be our peanut butter sandwich routine. And this routine, if we follow it, is going to result in a peanut butter sandwich. And it's not going to be the necessarily peanut butter sandwich for all the world, but it's going to be the peanut butter sandwich that we're going to use in this automation hour. And this we're actually going to use now for the next step. So hopefully everyone can use this to say, of our other business processes, once we understand what that business process or automation is going to do, can we step through and write it out? Now that we've written it out, we could take time and discuss this as a group and say, and you have actually in the chat said some things like, well, what if that peanut butter is of a natural kind that you can't just scoop your knife into and bring out peanut butter? Do you need to mix it first? So in your group's discussions, you might have to say, well, optional, mix peanut butter first. Maybe, but if you don't actually take time to plan this out, this is my advice to you, you aren't going to be able to have that dialogue. You're not going to be able to have that point where you can say, maybe we should add this to our routine or have this as an option to our routine. That stuff needs to get into your flow. And you can have that in your flow as one of your decision options. Decide based on the brand of peanut butter or based on the look of the peanut butter. Should you be mixing it first? Can you scoop your knife into it? If it's a plastic knife, can you scoop your knife into it? Will it come out with peanut butter or will it get stuck and snap off? I've had that happen. It's not fun.
Carol also pointed out in chat that I failed to close the peanut butter jar lid, so we are going to have all sorts of craziness in the world after this.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I may have closed the bread bag, but I totally forgot to close the peanut butter jar.
All right. Well, we are going to, I'm going to leave this open. I'd love to have more discussions about this as we go, but I'm going to continue with the discussion here because now that we've got our pseudocode, I'm going to move into flow charting and process mapping. So we're also going to do this as a live demonstration as well. And how, let's see, exit full screen. And I'm not going to do that. You don't need to see that. But I do want to bring up this. You don't need to see my yearly goal planning. That's boring. But you do need to see how I will do my flow charting. So let's think about that peanut butter. I can do my flow mapping, my charting in anything. I'm going to use PowerPoint because in the last automation hour presentation, the question came up of how do you do your mapping, and one of the suggestions that came up is use PowerPoint. Okay, well let's use PowerPoint. So let's do it, and we can use anything, but let's start it here. And so we had the ingredients. So we're going to start with wash hands. And then from there, I'm going to make an arrow and go to the next one, which is, I'm going to skip over some of these things and go to open bread bag. And then I'll make another line. And what I'm doing here is just kind of showing you that this does not have to be too difficult. I'm using a simple tool. You could use Miro to do this. I know that there's other tools, Elements, .cloud can do this. There are many tools that you can use to do this, but I'm using Notepad and PowerPoint to make these out. Let's see. I'm
Lucid
opening
chart.
Grid. Lucid chart. Yeah, that's great. That's another tool that also has Salesforce templates in it. I'm going to say, well, open the peanut butter.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great stuff coming in chat. So Lucid chart was definitely one. Mural is another great tool. I think Mural is pretty comparable to Miro. Similar to Lucidchart would be Draw.io. Of course, Elements.cloud, as you mentioned, has a free and paid version. The free version has a process mapping tool that's pretty cool. I actually had Johan Furman, who is a new 2023 MVP and a CTA. He's a proponent of using PowerPoint, and his logic is if your flow will not fit on a PowerPoint screen, it is, or a PowerPoint site, it's too complicated.
Yeah. Well,
So I always thought that was a very interesting kind of way to give yourself a canvas.
one of the reasons why I like doing this in Canvas is that it lets you then be more interactive with your peers. I did this with my 11-year-old son. We created a hamburger, but you could do this with the peanut butter sandwich, and we got just this far with the hamburger. And he said, "Wait a second. Well, wash hands is more complicated than that." And he said, "Well, don't we need to have like more explanation to wash hands?" And I'm like, "Okay, so tell me about that." And he said, "Well, we need more boxes here. We need like, so there is a routine to wash hands. There's, have, hot water and soap. And okay, so we'll get that here. And there's also, you need to have a 30-second song. because we sing a 30-second song when we wash our hands, and then you have to dry your hands here. And I know you already had that dry your hands as part of this thing. But then after we did this, and we talked about this, so this would be a subroutine. So this could be a subflow of your flow. So the wash hands subflow is called, because you don't necessarily need to have this be a flow, part of the flow that happens every single time you make a peanut butter sandwich. So now you have your wash hands subflow. And then he said, Dad, do we really need to have a wash hands subflow every time we make a hamburger? Couldn't we just have people get a vinyl glove? Like we could just have people put gloves on and then create the hamburger. Well, yes, I mean, that's an option. There are all sorts of options. You could have them wash hands. You could do a subflow that's wash hands. You could wear gloves. But without that discussion, without that able to diagram it out or use that pseudocode and sit down with your users or with your peers and say, what are the options? What is right in our scenario? Because it might be different. What might be right for you might not be right for the next organization or for the next group of users. But you need to sit down and have those talks before you just write your flow. I'm really going to encourage that you take time to discuss those things and sit down and dialogue, diagram, and have those relationships. So beat that into your head as much as I can. In the previous automation hours, I've shown you how to do permission sets. And when I did it, I talked about this as well, of you design out your flow and you talk about, what are the parts of your flow? In the flow that I did, I was talking about what are the pre-steps. You get the permission sets, then you make some choices about those permission sets, and then you do the work. And I encourage you that when you create your flows, do that same thing. Before you actually write the flows, plan it out. Diagram it out and say, what are the steps? What are the types of things that you're doing inside your flow? And then diagram it out, put it in pseudocode, and then explain those things before you show your flow. A good example of this I found out on the internet, this Xander. Good job, Xander. You actually showed us a pseudocode of what your flow does. You wrote it out of what the flow is supposed to do, and then you showed us in the flow how that works. And then you wrote a blog on it. Awesome. This is a gold star. I love this thing. And so anyone can go out to this website, look up this blog post about how to use a decision element inside of your flow, and look through how Xander did this. It's amazing. Good job. Once you have this will be kind of my last point, and then I'll stop talking. Once you've got these assets, now you can sit down and have discussions. You can look at how many steps are involved. You can think about that giant flow that we saw in the beginning of the slides. What are all the activities? What are all the actions involved? What are all the conditions that are involved? What are the problems that we might have? How many external processes are we going to hit? How many limitations might we hit? Are there DML statements that are going to be hit? How many queries are going to be performed? What sort of objects are we using? How many fields and formulas are we going to be running into? Use all of those questions, because in the next weeks of boot camps, as we're learning how to put these flows together, you're going to be asking yourself, when I build these flows, am I going to run into these problems? And so sit down with your peers, sit down with the people that are giving these flow presentations, and use them as resources, because I'm sure that they're going to be happy to answer these questions of what happens if I put too many decisions in my flows or too many queries in my flows? Those are things to ask, but still do testing on. But use your process maps, use your pseudocode to try and answer those questions up front. Lars Malmquist has a really good book on Salesforce Antipatterns. It talks about look at where records are manipulated. It's not just at code level, it's at flow level as well. So inside your flow, you may say, well, I'm only touching a couple records, but those records are also triggering other things. And so because Salesforce is a very triggered-based system, your records could be manipulated by other things. So keep those in mind. And then just reiterate that Salesforce, well architected, also has a lot of information and advice on how to keep things automated. These are some things for you to think about in your automation. Have clear logic, have data integrity, and always have alignment to business value. Think about what your business is trying to do and think about the KPIs. What are the business metrics that you're trying to hit when you're creating your automation? And so those are things that I want you to also think about. In the well architected, it also talks about that your design should be composable. And so when I think about that composable, I think about things like loose coupling and the separation of concerns. So loose coupling is don't try and tie your automation together and make it so that you can't pull things apart. Tom Hoffman, a couple automation hours ago, has a really interesting strategy around that. And so I'd have you go back and watch that if you want to know more about loose coupling and the strategy around how to compose your flow structure. So in summary, why do we do this documentation? Why do we do process mapping? So it is to have a communication point for all your stakeholders. It can be used for an onboarding tool for people who are new to the project. What are we building? It can be used for that. It can be used for help with change management, and it's a reference point for all the team members as they continue to look at that solution. And as you iterate that solution, you have a starting point. You have this map. You have the pseudocode that says, here's what I'm building, here's the steps, and here's why I'm building it. And that's a lot of me talking. So I'll stop with my slides right now.
Well, we have definitely had an active group in questions today. So we're going to run back up to the top. Shane wanted you to know that his wife is a CTE coordinator in Utah. So definitely caught some interest with that. And also, Kim Roberts was so thrilled with Coleco in her childhood as well. So 100%, I'm all about super nerd childhood. I gotta admit that I was not a ColecoVision child. But yeah, I'm all about the super nerd childhood for sure. So scrolling down past our pseudocode exercise, Lakshmi would like to know, how do you make sure that you don't miss any important clicks or results of a click when you're building your process maps? Or is that why you build the process maps?
That's why you build your process maps and why you need to engage as many stakeholders as you can. And when I first started out, I thought, well, I just want to involve other architects or lead engineers, because those are the people who I felt like were the most important. And now I realize that was folly. You need to include the people that are close to the metal, that are daily working on these automations or these business processes all the time, because they're the people that are going to know, oh, wait a second, what you forgot about what I do on every other Friday. Well, what do you mean by that? You bring in the stakeholders that are part of that process, because they're the ones that are going to know about that button off to the side that you thought was never used. It's about including and involving a lot of stakeholders and creating those relationships.
Absolutely. I think it's always easier for me to edit than create. So I've taken that and kind of gone, all right, I'll take the first version and I'll try and create that map, and then I'll bring everyone else in so they can edit. And that's always easier for everyone else to do. Since I find that easier, I assume they do too. So you take that first pass at it, and then that's where you have that discussion and go, all right, so where are the things that we need to talk about? Where should decisions be? What's specific to our use case and scenario here?
Yeah.
And that's where you uncover what you may have otherwise missed.
There are some other, like there's a BA tactic that sometimes I will make a wrong guess, and I know it's wrong, but it's because I just don't know. And I'll put it in there just because I'm hoping that someone will catch that wrong guess and say, 2 plus 2 does not equal 6. Did you know that? And I'll be like, oh, really? Well, can someone here tell me what 2 plus 2 does equal? And someone in the room will know what the answer is and educate me. But I'll add that to the flow or to the map just to see who actually knows what that process does.
And it's a good way to break the ice. A lot of times, especially in larger groups, people are maybe more hesitant to share their opinions, but if they see something that they know is wrong, they want to correct it. And so they're more likely to speak up, and once you've broken that ice, then more people will jump in and you'll get much better response. That's actually a really good tactic. I should try that myself. So put in something you know is wrong specifically for someone to call out and break the speaking ice in your
Yep.
session. Awesome. All right. So Dylan would like to know if you will share a copy of the presentation deck.
Absolutely.
So, and we will absolutely put that in our YouTube channel along with the recording. So Greg Devine shared a oldie but goodie YouTube video, and I have no idea what this is, but I'm going to trust that Greg is not going to rickroll anyone here. So I'm going to throw this in chat. Watch at your own risk, because I don't know what Greg sent us, but I'm guessing it's something topically related. So Arvinder would like to know that most of the tools we mentioned are paid subscriptions. Do we have any suggestions for free tools?
Well, everything that I showed today, well, I mean, PowerPoint is, I mean, you would have to pay for an office, but Draw.io is free. Miro, you can get a free personal license for. Notepad, I mean, it's free. I mean, any sort of word processor you can use for free. Yeah, there's a ton of free options out there. I'm a big fan of free.
Yep, and I know the process mapping portion of elements.cloud is free. The rest of it has a paid portion, but the process mapping is available in their free account or license. So we'll put that in there as well. And I think I just sent that to the wrong person, so I'll fix that. So will there be any necessity of adding a custom coding in the flow, and if so, how? That's from Vinayak.
Hmm. I would need a little more context.
All right. If you are out there and able to give us some more context, I think that would be helpful. Yeah, I guess the question when I interpret it is, do you need to add custom code into your flow, maybe to document it or to do anything like that?
Oh,
Or would that be a way to document it? Or perhaps the question was, how do you document it if there's custom code in your flow? Does it make a difference?
that is That's a good question. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Right. Okay. So yeah, a scenario where the requirement isn't met by the existing controls or options. So I think for me, you'd still pseudocode it out and it would essentially just become an Apex action on the canvas in Flow. So you'd still account for that in your pseudocode just like you would any other element or action on the canvas.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I think the purpose is you still have to document what is the goal of that. Even if you've got custom code that calls out an external process or an external system, what is the goal of that code? What is the business reason for that, or even what is the technical reason for that? And make sure that that is explained so that if I were to win $1 million or get hit by the bus, or whatever your analogy is that the next person that comes to take over my flow would look at that and say, oh, well, this makes sense. And if that's inside of your process map or your pseudocode or some sort of written logic that goes along with your flow, that's explainable. It's an archive or an asset that goes along with your flow. But don't just leave it as a mystery for the next person. And the next person could be you in 9 months after you've had a busy vacation or something else that happens in your life.
All right, so Ellie has an interesting question. So if we have to work backwards, we inherit an org with flows that are not documented. So do we click on each element and write out the pseudocode, or what is the best way for us to basically deal with that when it wasn't done in the right order to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I have done and am doing right now is you can kind of side by side with your mapping tool, your process um, uh, mapping software, and flow, and draw them out and look at what the element is, and then inside of the element look and see what are the fields it touches, what are the actions, and start to write them out. It is a long process at the beginning, but at least I've started to see like patterns of what these elements are touching as far as the objects and fields, and then you start to get a understanding of at least the types of things that they're touching, and if they're returning back values, you can start to put that together in your process maps without having a technical resource there to help explain. The other thing you might do is try and find a business partner that might be using whatever actions these are called from. So if the flow is being called from a button or some sort of trigger, see if you can find the business partner that is using those buttons or triggers, and asking them what is the business process that this is being run from.
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, really for me, when I go in there, it's, can I get a sense from the canvas of, okay, so what triggers it? What objects do we have in here? What thing happening to that object is triggering it? And can I sort of figure out what that business process is? And then again, you're right, you document what everything does, every element on the canvas, and then you can take that, and essentially it's almost like writing your pseudocode. It's sort of almost not, I mean, not real code, but it's real what the flow is doing. And then you take that from where you would pseudocode and turn that into your process map. It's possibly a little more detailed because you're documenting what exists as opposed to starting with a kind of a basic concept and fleshing it out. It's like you skipped the outline and you went straight to writing your dissertation there.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely, it can be a time-consuming process when you're trying to figure that out in a new org.
that's maybe one of the hardest things to do. I've had to do that a number of times of coming into an organization where the development staff has gone and you are left to re-engineer what is left. That's not, I do not envy your situation.
Indeed, that can be tough. So, but hang in there. And I know I did a session on documentation where if you're faced with a full org of that, um, start with what is business critical, if you can figure out what that is, or start with the things that the most people touch. So if they're on objects that are heavily used, start there, and just do it as you go and make sure that as you start building or modifying more things, you put these practices in. Oh, here's an interesting question. And Julia, I want a follow up. It says, can you throw it into a tool or chat GPT? So I'm wondering what the it is. Are we throwing like the flow, like the JSON file, or are you talking about throwing your pseudocode into a tool or chat GPT? Stu, what do you think about that? I'll be honest, I've avoided chat GPT like the plague since I heard about Sydney.
Yeah, we've been some of my peers and I have been playing around with ChatGPT just to see if we can get it to trick it. Let's see. Is that, I don't know. I have yet to see what it can and cannot do. So I don't know. We'll probably know more in the next 6 months of what valid business cases that we can get out of that tool. But to be honest, I mean, even in my advertisement of this session, I'd said, what if we had an easy button that Salesforce could put out there that would document and tell us what our flows do. And I had a couple people that messaged me directly and said, "Are we getting that? Are we getting that?" And I said, "I hope not, because I don't think that that's valuable. I think that having real people sit down and talk about the flows, talk about their business processes, and talk about automation, and have real dialogue, and then really map it out and say, what are our business goals? That is where the true value is. Having Salesforce build us an easy button that will push in a flow and then put a documentation out, I don't really think that that's going to work. I mean, that's my opinion. That's Stu's opinion. But yeah, it might document, here's the inputs and outputs, but will it really tell you why that thing exists and what is the business value of it? No, I don't think it will.
Yeah, to be honest, there's only one easy button I've ever seen, and it's this one that sits in my office. Um, it's one of my favorite things. It's like, if somebody asks for an easy button, I just pull that up. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if Chat GPT could even read JSON code or what it would come up with from that. But I think it's very difficult for anybody who's not familiar with the business and the business processes to really give you that answer. Um, so cool. All right, doing one last check of all our questions here. Again, it was a busy session, so I'm making sure I didn't leave anybody's questions behind. Oh, and yes, also Mural has a free version as well, so that's another option that you can use for tools. And Stu, I think we have actually managed to answer all of our questions from the audience today. So definitely a lot of people saying this was fantastic. So thank you so much for coming.
I'm excited for the next round of boot camp. Like, I look at your list of all the content and it's going to be awesome.
We're excited for it too. So next up sessions are going to be talking about all of the different pieces in Flow Builder. So what are the different elements? What are the different resources that you use? When should you be using each of them? And just kind of helping you get familiar with that. So should be some real fun stuff coming up. But Stu, as always, thank you for coming. Thank you for presenting. We absolutely could not do this without amazing guest presenters like you, and we're always thrilled to have you here.
Thank you very much.
All right, I am throwing our link in the chat for signing up for upcoming sessions. And with that, we'll see you on the next Automation Hour. Have a great rest of your day, all. Bye-bye.